Good evening. It is Thursday night. It is 8 p.m. It is time for what the cool kids are still calling ASTV, the American Scouser TV Thursday night podcast. Just the two of us tonight. It's me and Scott back after a long hiatus. How are you, Scott?
I am doing well. I'm very happy to be back. Glad I had a little bit of time to do this with you.
That's always fun. Before we get going on anything tonight, you have to say a big happy birthday to our compadre Paul Bickler.
Yes.
He's years old. Let's put it that way. Still not as old as I am though, or Timuchin. But a great big shout out to the big man there. We started last week with our absolutely brilliant breaking news that Everton were indeed still tragic and Liverpool were indeed still magic. But we actually have proper breaking news today because apparently Caoimhín Kelleher will not be with us next season. At the end of the season, he leaves Liverpool. Scott, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as soon as it comes through, it's not necessarily a shocker. I think that in terms of quality, he's far beyond his years, and he's far beyond a second string keeper. We can be honest and say, he deserves to be starting elsewhere, and frankly that's true, but as a biased supporter, I would much rather him be there whenever we need him there, in the chance that Allison is injured or needs some rest. But I won't say it's a shock. I will say I'm sad about it though.
It certainly isn't really a shock. And then from my extra perspective as obviously a Republic of Ireland fan, him getting first team football is good for our national team.
Right.
But for Liverpool, Becker's 30, well, maybe just 30 or going on 31. I can't remember which side of that coin he falls. He's not going to be great forever. And Caoimhín Kelleher looked like he was a fantastic future replacement. It looks like we're going to be stuck with Adrian as the second choice unless we pluck somebody else out. It's not a good situation right now, is it?
I'm sure that another keeper is definitely on the cards when it comes to future transfers, because frankly, Adrian's been about how long has he been on the team? Because that's about how long he's
on the team as long as Bickler is old.
Yeah,
that's how long he's been on the team.
And the reality is Adrian is getting a lot of money to post game Instagrams for his teammates and to make sure that a seat is warm for whichever future second or third keeper comes up, whether that's Peter Luga that comes up, and gets a promotion. But yeah, surely we're going to have another keeper on the cards if Kelleher leaves. The reality is we need one, whether that's through the academy or whether that's a transfer. The reality is we have other spots that need to be taken, especially when it comes to an international roster spot. And I think that the team, the fans, Adrian, we're all probably in agreement that this may be, the point in which we need to move on.
Is it, do you think, just to be a little bit controversial, is it a failure of management board sporting directors that he clearly hasn't felt assured that he has a future at Liverpool in any time soon, and felt he had to move away to increase his ability more than anything else?
I think that keeper is a unique position that when it comes to becoming a starting keeper, when you're getting the experience and gaining into a beginning of your career, you really don't see many keepers come through ranks. I mean, I just can't think of, at least within the top six, that a keeper that's come through the ranks. Generally, you go on, and the only way you can prove that you're capable of being a top first keeper for a team is showing that you do it week in, week out with another team. And I think it would be a savvy business point to obviously put any sort of buyback clause that we may be able to get in some sort of contract in the future. But I wouldn't say that it's a failure, only on the chance that the keeper, whether it's training, whether it's mentality, or whether it's just the position alone, is a unique breed. And You know?
I fully agree with that. I've always said that whole goalkeepers union is a real thing. Especially if you're the second or third keeper, you know that you're generally there to help train the first
Yeah.
team keeper, even though you're getting your own minutes in and your own touches yourself. But in terms of what I mean by failure, is like, do you think we were able to sell the idea of staying at Liverpool to him, or do you think Klopp did one of his, what we've talked about before, his sentimentality things, where he said, what's best for your career is what's best for
Yeah.
you. And in that case, just to add on to what you said about the buyback clause, do you think this is going to be one of those rare but regular enough situations where we're going to have to buy back our own previous former player at a hugely expensive price? Because if he goes anywhere near where his talent says he might go, he would possibly be one of the most expensive keepers in the Premier League.
He very well could be, and like you said, in a outlook of a Republic of Ireland, mentality, it's the best for him, it's the best for the career, it's the best for the country's national team. When it comes to him moving on for the future, he has to be not pleased with not playing week in, week out. And we as a team can only allow players to play with us that are willing to be there. So I don't think that he's enraged. I don't think he's mad at the situation, but I think he recognizes that what is best for him, his future, his career, his national team, is that he does go away and get that experience as a first team player every single week. And I would say when it comes to Jurgen Klopp, obviously he's not going to stand in the way of a player that wants to play. And Brian mentions here, footballers have to play, and that's the reality. That's exactly true. When it comes to any player, they want to play. Unless you're,
Aaron Anderton.
Yeah.
From way back when.
Well, when it comes to maybe a player that's gotten his money move, maybe that's one thing. But you got a young, talented player that loves the game of football, that wants to play the game of football. Jurgen Klopp's not going to, hold him down.
Where do you see him going, do you think? I mean, he seems like he could be a Spurs acquisition, or maybe Chelsea even. But obviously United and City are probably out of the running in terms of if he ever wants to come back to Liverpool. That's not something you want to have staying you, really, is it?
Yeah, I don't really quite know if he has any sort of allegiance to a specific team prior to joining Liverpool. I would say that in terms of the business side of things, Liverpool will be very unlikely to sell to a direct rival, only because I don't foresee us making a Raheem Sterling transfer anytime soon. You see a lot of this Arsenal and Chelsea stuff that's been going on in years past, and, Chelsea, Manchester United in years past. I personally think that he's capable of playing for a top side. I also don't think that it would be in England if it is a top side. When it comes to England, if he was to stay in Britain, he would probably have to make the transition down to a lower level squad and prove himself there.
Just to kind of refute Brian's suggestion of Spain, the guy is as pasty white as any Irishman could possibly be. He was born to a crisp within 2 days, Brian. It would be like you'd have to change his name to Queeveen Barbecue. Do you think that as I said, that we're kind of letting him leave because we like him, because the staff likes him, because he's clearly a hard worker, and he hasn't complained in the press, he hasn't done any kind of interviews.
Mm-hmm.
Or do you think it's just that kind of like a niceness to it, or is it because he's a ginger and we just don't want him anywhere near the rest of the
Well, besides the ginger fact, which we honestly have to take into account, the reality is it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? So you're going to be able to either say you want him to move on. Let's talk even before then. You were talking about not going out of the press, not speaking out against it. Obviously, I'm sure he is disappointed with the situation, but he's a team player. He's there for us. And that's the type of personalities that the team vets and gets for their first team. So I have no surprise in my mind that he's, frustrated, but obviously we pick players that are mentally strong and mentally tough, not going to create any sort of ruffles in the team. When it comes to letting him, move on or things like that. We could say in 2 years, or however long, in 3 years, when a contract is narrowly done, letting him go for pennies or free. And now fans are saying, oh, well, we just let a great player go for nothing. The reality is I think we're having far too much expectation on that quality of a player to be sitting week in, week out for however long Allison's going to be here. We don't know how long Allison's prime is going to be. It does not show any signs of stopping anytime soon.
Let's move on from the let's say the possible future. We hope that we get that buyback clause, because he does look like he's going to be a great keeper, and it'd be great to see him succeed, Allison, even if we have to pay a little bit of money for it, right. The privilege. To the recent past, which was delightful, which we called last weekend. I know the lads on Monday night talked about it. He's cleaving. He's cleaving. All the photos are Beatles. Revolution number 7. So I want to talk a little bit more about the tactical implications and ideas that behind what happened on with the weekend with United, because it was as complete a performance as we've had in a long, long time, wasn't it?
Without a doubt. I thought that we're obviously going to go into the tactics more, but just talking about the intensity, just the absolute amount of will and drive that the players showed was something that this season has been lacking, whether that's personally, internally, or whether that's just fatigue from the last season, the World Cup, etc. It's something that we haven't seen enough, and it was an absolute joy to watch. I've seen recently that there's been some slag on Liverpool fans for maybe milking this a little bit too much. The reality is you beat, quote unquote, the most informed team in the league 7-0, your bitterest rival. We're going to be milking this for as long as we want to be milking it.
The Toblerone has nothing on us for the amount of milk that's going to be used on this. But let's start kind of from the start. It would be unfair to call it a game of two halves, because we played well in both halves. Maybe United started off a little bit stronger, but I'm not sure strong would be the right word. I think they were just a little bit more together within themselves for the first part of the game. And here's the United formation. It's very tight, 4-3, like almost an old school 4-3-3 or an Juventus 4-2-3-1. But that gap between their attackers and their midfield and defence in the average positions clearly shows that they were worried about us, despite their great run of form. It really looks like they wanted to compact the middle and then hit us on the break somehow. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, like you said, in the beginning, they definitely had way more, tight formations and compactness within their formation, looking to get speed and frankly, betting on Trent not paying attention and getting some space out on their left flank to kind of play balls in to pace like Antony and Rashford coming off the back post. The reality is, like you said, they never necessarily had the ability or the pleasure of just having possession and being able to gain some sort of momentum. I thought that in the first half, we started very well. If we want to cut the game in sixth, I'll give them 1/6 of the game that they had a decent hold in terms of their formation. Not a hold on the game, but a hold in their formation. But when it comes to what Liverpool were capable of doing throughout the first half, regardless of whether we scored or not prior to the goal, I thought that it was very, very, very influential on how the game turned out.
It's interesting you say that about their plan to attack that Trent's wing, because if we look at like the difference in the attacking sides, we're clearly well balanced.
Yeah,
like literally a difference of 1% between the middle and the right side. But United clearly went down that left side and tried to attack our right, and it didn't work for them, did it? I will say it didn't work because they didn't support their attackers too much. As much as we did, and I think maybe the agree or disagree that was the difference between the two teams. If we just look at our average positions, we are very together. Like there's a lot of joined upness about how we play it. It's really hard to tell what kind of a 4-3-3 we were playing there if we were playing it, because we weren't. If we were, then Robertson was the left winger, and almost Henderson was the left back tucked in. So really, it was a 4-3-1-2 almost with Salah and Nunez destroying them up there. We could have had 3 more goals in the first half. It could have easily been an embarrassing 10-0, couldn't it?
Oh, for sure. I mean, when it comes to the first half, our ability to move the ball fast, and that's what I was saying about regardless of whether we scored or not, we were influential. Brian speaks about our control in the small period before the goal, and it's exactly true. When you talk about the ability for a team to gain possession, gain attack, and gain momentum towards the goal, it's less to do with whether the outcome is scoring and more to do with the outcome of how you're making the other team play. So when we're moving the ball fast, when we're be able to get attacking positions, when you looked at the formation or our average formation right there, you saw how high Robertson was playing, how deep Nunez was getting into the center. And the reality is when you stay in a traditional 4-3-3, you give the defenders less to worry about, less to run, less to think about looking over their shoulder. When you see how Nunez is tucking into the center and when you see how Robertson's getting so high, you're now forcing a formation to separate. You're forcing a formation to be able to have to play more of a man-to-man versus a zone type marking. Because Nunez is making a run, obviously their right back's going to follow him. And now that you have Robertson, you're going to force Antony into a position that he doesn't want to be in. And obviously we saw time and time again, he wasn't. And when you force them to run further and further, obviously you're going to find those gaps.
Even in terms of when I coached, I always told attackers that the best thing to do is to make sure defenders have 2 decisions they have to make, because they're going to make the wrong one a lot of the time. And as you say, Nunez coming in off that wing, either that fullback has to go with him or he has to pass them off to somebody, which they did as well a lot of the time. And that's where we got our gaps, because they didn't seem to know who was supposed to pick up Nunez. They didn't seem to know who was to pick up Gakpo, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. And that meant that they couldn't pay any attention to Salah, which suddenly Salah looked like the Salah of 2 years ago, didn't he?
Oh, for sure. Once we started getting actual movement, more fluidity, like Brian said earlier, it's the reality is that you're capable of opening gaps. And, I mentioned Nunez talking about the movement, but the space he went into was because of exactly what you said, because of Gakpo's amazing game and amazing. I mean, you look at his second goal, which maybe we'll look at in a little bit on. He starts so far back, creating the space that he ends up inevitably running into, and what Salah was able to get so central in on his run. It's all about the runs off the ball. It's all about the space you create. And like you said, I think it was a great point. Making defenders have 2 decisions that they have to pick from allowed us to be able to basically make them make no decision.
Yeah. I made a comment on the Discord channel, which everybody should be on if they're cool enough, that during the game was that we were seeing the chaos football that Jurgen Klopp has become so renowned for. And in terms of what you said a little bit earlier with Man United, they didn't show any joined up thinking between their attack and their defense, which was very un-Dutch like, I thought. The Dutch soccer has always been about doing the 2 things simultaneously. Whereas we looked like our defense wasn't just a matter of getting back the ball, but getting the ball in a position that we could instantly counterattack from, thus creating that chaos. We can talk about fatigue, we can talk about the World Cup and all that, but is that the thing that we should be looking for every week? Is that what Jurgen Klopp is maybe saying to the players is, see what we just did there? Let's do that for the rest of the season.
I think it's interesting because, obviously we want a 7-0. We want that intensity every single game. The reality is we're going to have instances where our players are just up for it more than other games. And when you're playing Manchester United, you better be fucking up for it. And when you look at the sprint differences, I saw that they put out a stat that I think that Liverpool's stats for kilometers run were about 101 in the game versus Manchester United was at 99. So there's really not much difference when it came to the distance ran between the two teams. What it actually had to do was exactly what you said, forcing possession turnovers in positions that we wanted them to be in to be able to be advantageous in getting forward. And when it comes to what Jurgen Klopp spoke about in his press conference after the game about how Harvey Elliott has some of the highest pressing and ball retention stats coming from a press in the league, as well as what we seemingly saw a version of 3 years ago of Jordan Henderson actually retaining possession and winning balls back from the center of the pitch. It's less to do about, forcing them where they want to play, because any team can sit back in defense, force a bad shot, and get the ball as a goal kick. What we're doing is not necessarily running more, not necessarily running faster. We're being smarter with our times that we're forcing the press. And when we go in a good position to gain that ball back, we went with absolute ferocity, and it worked time and time again.
From my perspective, personal perspective, I grew up with Jack Charlton as the Ireland manager. He was one of the first pressing managers, if you actually look back through the history of coaching. He took it to an art form, I thought, and I've always been a huge fan of his. So when I coached teams, I coached pressing. And when I did, when you do the coaching courses and all that, that's the topic you want to get because you know it inside out. Now, just as a comparison, Brendan Rodgers, when in every team he's at, always talks about the quality of his team's pressing, but they don't really press those teams. The Man United don't really press. Arsenal don't really press. The only other pressing teams I can think of are City and Brentford, who are genuine presser. Because what people seem to forget is it's not just the man going to the ball, is it? It's the coordination behind that player that means we win the second ball, which is where that chaos happens.
Yeah, and when you talk about the formation, they talk about what's called splitting the field, making the field smaller. So you're not necessarily pressing one player and then pressing the next ball or the next player. You're pressing a space. So when you see, let's say, for example, Nunez forcing a player wide, what he's doing is signaling the rest of his team to go with him into that gap, with him into the space, cutting that field in half, cutting the half in half, making a quarter of the field to focus on. Not to say that the players outside of that aren't in the formation, but the ones that are within that quarter of the field have to be hyper-focused and hyper-aware of what the tactics are to be able to press into space and basically suffocate them of any options. When we were looking at about the formation of our average positioning, there was a space really close you can see between Trent and Harvey Elliott about how capable they were of really isolating Luke Shaw when he was getting the ball. And I don't know if you guys recall, but there was tons of wayward passes going to Bruno Fernandes, whether that was because of Fernandez's lack of desire to play a fucking game or whether that was Luke Shaw's inability to pass the ball. The reality is we were doing our work to force it without ever having to make a sliding tackle, without ever having to actually press the ball or press the man in contact.
It's interesting you talk about, the focus on Luke Shaw because, a player that large probably has his own gravitational orbit anyway, so he's pulling players into.
Yeah, he only had a couple halftime pies. That's probably why the things came through.
But it just when you were talking there, interestingly, I had like a typical, I want to say a drunken pub debate rather, but I wasn't drunk because I don't drink. But with somebody watching the game way back in 2014-15. Yeah, 2014-15. About Daniel Sturridge being lazy when we were pressing, but nobody seemed to realize that Daniel Sturridge was doing what you were talking about, what Nunez is doing. He was positioning himself to take the inside passes away so that they had to go in a certain area and make the play predictable, as they say. We've discussed Nunez getting it in terms of the pressing thing. Gakpo, we discussed, how long will it take to get it? But that was pretty much clockwork, wasn't it, on Saturday from those two players, two new players in sync with the rest of the team. It just looked magic, didn't it?
Without a doubt. I think that Obviously, a player is going to have some betting in time. But when it came to a press, when it came to specifically their positioning within the formation and within cutting off passing lanes, it was exceptional. They were capable of exactly what you said about Daniel Sturridge, capable of being able to close lanes and force passes that Manchester United may not have even noticed that they were playing into our hands. But once you force them to pick one pass on a 30-yard pass, you can begin to start making them pick passes on the 10-yard level, the 5-yard level. Next thing you know, they've run out of space and they either have to clear it long and we win a 50-50, or they go ahead and make a bad pass and we regain it right in a dangerous position. I think that Nunez, when it came to the first half of the season, showed that he is a willing runner when it comes to pressing. There's definitely no argument or discussion that should be had when it comes to his willingness and desire to win a ball. But maybe it had more to do with the intellectual pressing, right? Being able to push that ball where you want it to versus just running head down full tilt to a player and trying to fucking slam him. Obviously, if you're looking at the best center backs in the world, and obviously, Maldini was able to always say if he had to make a tackle, he did something wrong. I think that is a great point to look into for the rest of the players, being able to say that every player has that defensive responsibility and be able to defend correctly. If you're making the tackle, if you're physically putting in a tackle, that is probably the end of what our formation was trying to do, or you're not within the formation itself.
If we look again just at the average positions, I can't put them up side by side, so we'll look at them individually. So we talked about how if you just looked at that, you would call it maybe a 4-2-3-1, but none of the players almost are in the positions that you would expect them to be in a 4-2-3-1.
Right.
Whereas if you look at the United, it is very straightjacket, isn't it? It's very like you can draw straight lines like from one end of the field to the other end of the field and catch players on it almost exclusively. Did that rigidity in United's game plan work against them in terms of the confusion that we were bringing? Not on our part. We clearly knew what we were doing, but they didn't.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely something to be said with what they wanted to do, right? When it comes to the ability to defend as a team or attack as a team, you have to have a formation or an initial start point, but you have to be running into spaces. You have to be creating space for your teammates. I don't love giving Pep Guardiola credit on things, but if you look at his Barcelona team, they spoke about how 9 out of 10 runs that he wanted his wingers to make, they wouldn't get the ball. And he wanted them to make that run over and over and over again because it was creating space for his center mids, for Xavi and Iniesta to be able to get into. We have the exact same impetus of what we're trying to do, and clearly Manchester United didn't. They were looking for fast-paced reactions, winning the ball and putting it into space to run onto, versus the runs coming and creating space to move the ball into. They were basically just looking, try to find channels, try to beat a man one-on-one, and look for Rashford's pace and his form to be able to get them out of a bad situation. And frankly, it didn't work, and I was ecstatic for it.
He may be Andy Carroll reincarnated, but as far as I'm concerned, Nunez will always have the look down pat.
That's right.
Let's look at the stats a little bit. We did dominate basically, didn't we? There was no question of it. It's not very often that we can say that we dominated a Manchester United team. But even if the scoreline was only 3-0, maybe we hit the post a few times, hit the crossbar or whatever, there still would be any question that certainly in the second half, we took them to the cleaners, didn't we?
We absolutely did. And it was a joy to watch, to see the fact that we didn't take our foot off the pedal either. We were able to smell blood in the water and we kept going. And when you have a team capable of doing that, but also the desire to do it, mix those two things and they were able to do whatever they wanted. When it came to the formation, I think that it just showed time and time again that there was space to be had. I don't know how many balls we were able to pass in within the 18 from one person to another with inside the 18, but it was incredible to see because the reality is that we haven't seen it enough this season. So for them to click, whether that's we haven't seen it, I mean, maybe you can have an answer, but we haven't seen it maybe because the players needed that betting in time and now we've just clicked for the first time and we're able to go beyond, or whether it was we've just had different tactics. You know, I'm not in the training staff. I don't know what they're talking about over, you know, at training, but when it comes to how the players played specifically in that second half, I mean, there was nothing like it that I've seen.
This season, certainly.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, as somebody who coaches, and anybody who has coached for, I want to say a period. I don't want to downgrade. I don't think there's any level of coaching that doesn't have the same headaches as every other level, even if you're coaching under sevens.
Yeah.
But you won't know these problems until you've done it for a long time. So you put your training plan into practice for the week. You have maybe you have a curriculum you stick to, like Rafa. He always stuck with what his yearly plan was, regardless of what the results were. Or maybe you coach to the next game, which I think Jurgen Klopp probably does a little bit more of.
Yeah.
But you have your plan. Your training sessions reflect what you want your players to do. It looks good in training. And really, what people don't seem to understand is, as much as confident and as much as coaches want to think that they have all the ideas, it's still a crapshoot come the start whistle, isn't it? But for the majority of the season, is it possible that that's what's been happening? That for all the various reasons we talked about, fatigue, mental fatigue, maybe loss of focus because the World Cup was smack bang in the middle of the season, that it was a crapshoot every week. And now that we don't have those distractions, do you think we're going to see a more consistent level of performance?
Right. And first of all, I don't know what trainings you're having, because in my trainings, my team never look great in practice. There's always something going wrong that has to be fixed. And, you know, maybe for Liverpool, when it comes to trainings, whether it was injuries and players in and out that are essential to a formation or a style of how we want it to play, whether it was, you know, difficulties of maintaining focus while a World Cup is in the middle of your dang season, whatever it may be, I think that you're exactly right. Jurgen Klopp's looking at a week-to-week basis, going for the next game, being able to train on what has to be done better or what we can do and flourish. What I will say is, yeah, we definitely played to Manchester United's weaknesses, but everything that we did was, case in point, the best things Liverpool can do. So when it comes to, you know, pressing a team on a specific side, trying to isolate a bad defender, that's something that maybe teams try to do against us. But I will say that beyond going for maybe Manchester United's weaknesses, going down the left flank or trying to play in the space that wingers should be defending that they weren't, we were doing what we do best, which is cycle the play from our strikers coming in short, having space in behind, and accessing that space with our wingers. And we did it time and time again. And then when the wingers go into the center, we have our outside backs be able to get higher and higher, forcing their team back, whether it's forcing them back or whether it's having space because their wingers don't follow them, which is what happened here. We ended up with attacks on, 6v4, 6v3. It looks like every player wanted to score and every player had the ability to score, for sure. It was a joy to watch. But I think that the trainings definitely can be more fluid and definitely be more concise now that we don't have distractions and players are coming back from injury looking fresh and looking to join a team that seems to be catching some form.
I don't want to put a dampener on a great team performance, but coach to coach, there was one point later on in the game where I think it was a 4v2 that we had. I think Salah ended up having the ball on the left-hand side and it got messed up. I don't have much hair left in my head, and a part of that is probably from the years of coaching, but would that have had you turn everything out, every single hair of your body if you saw
it's
lose a 4v2 on goal?
It's incredible when you get into those positions, especially when, you have players of that capability looking to slot a ball into just what should be an open net based on the amount of passes you can make in that position. Had it not been 7-0, Yeah, I think that I would be pulling out starting my beard hair because I got no hair on the top of my head anymore. But when it comes to, in games, you work the ball to be able to get in those opportunities. You have a 4v2. If you can't make a 4v2 trying to work into getting those positions in the first place, I mean, it's shattering. It's shattering for a coach because they worked so hard on everything. That's the hard work getting there, right? The passes after that should be the easy thing to slot it into a passing, open goal.
I think for me, when I saw I was watching it all by myself, and I was sitting there going, I wasn't a huge fan of the stop, stand still method of coaching. I used a lot of like 4v4s and 3v3s to get my points across, but that would have been a stop, stand still because that was a crazy piece of play. But overall, absolutely fantastic performance, and a nice segue into the next part, which will be the weekend. We have Bournemouth coming up.
Yep.
Who are, as we say, carrying that way. It's us in fifth, and then all the way down in the basement, holding up the rest of the league.
Oh, poor
on
guy.
paper, let's before we talk banana skins, on paper, it should be a foregone conclusion, but soccer just doesn't work like that, does it?
It really doesn't. It doesn't. And it's a shame it doesn't because on paper, yeah, we are 14 places ahead of them. In my mind, Manchester United's scoreline isn't even the biggest scoreline we had this season, right? We smacked Bournemouth 9-0 this season. The fact is that in my head, I feel like, yeah, we have the players, we have the capability, and right now, we have the form. But like you said, there are some games that just get away from you, and it's definitely a interesting battle that Liverpool have to have internally of maintaining that intensity, going from destroying your bitterest rivals to not sitting back on your heels and be able to keep going after that. Find the next game that brings you happiness.
Let's flip the perspective a little bit, and let's talk about if we are Bournemouth players. So you're thinking the last time we played this lot, it was almost double figures. And they've just beat the form team and one of the best teams in England by almost double figures. What are you thinking as a Bournemouth player right now?
Oh, you're scared shitless. You're scared shitless. And not just that, Brian just mentioned about the Arsenal game. 97th minute, Arsenal go and take the win off them after they were, leading. And not only do they have to worry about us being in form, they're shattered from that last game. And being able to, try to be winning and winning against the first place team just to lose in the last second of the game is shattering, and it's demoralizing, and it's something that you mentally have to really work towards getting through, besides the fact that you're also last place and about to be relegated. And now you put those two things on top of the fact that you have to face the team that just beat the most informed team 7-0, that just beat you 9-0. It's definitely a very, very tall, very, very steep staircase that they have to climb. I think that, frankly, some of their play has been very good this season. I think that they have good players, capable players, especially for such small market team that they are. But when it comes to the mental side of things, before even playing the game, they have an uphill battle they're playing.
So let's play a little bit of Fantasy Island. You're the Bournemouth manager for this weekend. How are we approaching the game?
Oh gosh, you're sitting back your team as much as you can. You're putting a back five with a 4 in the line, and you're putting Dominic Solanke up in striker, and you are hoping that your outside midfielders can find some space to run onto and slot a ball up. I don't think that they're going to be able to have a lot of possession. I don't think that they're going to be looking for a lot of possession. I think that they'll be doing the old Crystal Palace, pick the ball up and try to nick a 1-0.
In terms of, Murphy's Law and all that, they might have that plan with a healthy dose of fear involved in putting it into fruition. But do you think that might actually end up working in their favor? Because we have had problems with the teams that did that in the recent past.
We definitely have. I think that teams have been successful with that in the past when we don't have the intensity needed to be able to move the ball fast enough to break down those lines. It looks like that we've definitely worked on our speed of play. We've worked on our ball movement through the midfield, and it looks like we're going to try to play as fast as possible to break down those lines. I don't think that they will be playing. They said play for a 0-0 draw and 1 on the break. That's exactly it. I don't think that they'll be playing their own game. And that's probably the biggest testament to the Liverpool side, right? A team's going to be playing against us, not the best that they can play, the best that they can hope to beat us. And they have to be on it to be able to have the possibility, a chance of us messing up. If Liverpool are on it, they have no shot.
I have always been of the opinion, and it has worked for me in actual games. It's not just the theory that when a team sits back against it and perceives it as the tougher team, give them the ball, let them do the work, and then see what they're capable of. Because it'll either become, as Brian says, a 0-0 war of attrition with 1 on the break as both teams just keep kicking the ball back and forth to each other.
Yeah.
Or they do actually get stupid and try and come out and play with it, and then that's when you find your gaps. Assuming that we can bring the exact same intensity that we did and the exact same cohesion in the attack, and I would imagine we would probably have to start with the exact same team if possible. Do you think we're looking at maybe trying to get an early goal rather than leave it to not that we left it till halftime, but get that early goal and then make them have to change their game plan?
For sure. An early goal will force them to have to play their own game. And if they have to play their own game, there will be gaps. When it comes to being able to nick an early goal, obviously that is always somebody's intention, but that intention has to be matched with the desire, has to be matched with the speed. And we saw it for sure during Manchester United. I think that there was a fantastic impetus. You saw in the 4th minute, everyone's saying to themselves, we look good. It looks like we're playing really well. We're playing hard. And if we could just put our heads down and basically have that heavy metal football for the first 10 minutes, if we're able to get a goal within those first 10 minutes, I foresee it being a far easier 80 minutes than not scoring within there.
Now, what pleased me about the United game, almost more than anything else, was seeing Núñez score 2 headed goals.
Oh, yeah.
Is that going to be a vital contributory factor to us winning this weekend if Bournemouth decide to pack the box, that we actually now have somebody who can put the ball up front, not relying on Van Dijk to get up there or whatever, but somebody up front who can knock the ball in, and now we seem to know that we can literally fire the ball at any velocity at his head and he'll put it in the on frame.
For sure. I mean, everyone's talking about his, end product, but to put those 2 chances away will do him a world of good in terms of his confidence, but also the rest of the team's confidence to be able to throw a ball up and throw it long. We have Gakpo up, who's 6'3" or something like that, who hasn't scored a header yet for us, but it seems like he's just as capable in the air. We have a different style of play that we're capable of doing against these back lines, that we don't need a set piece to hold on to or need a set piece to be able to bring our center backs on. Long gone are the days, thank God, that Stephen Calker is not coming up as an auxiliary striker that we can throw the ball up to. It looks like that we have some multifunctional forwards that can play multiple different styles of play.
In terms of our lineup, which do you think that we should go with the same team that started, given that we have no cup games, no Euro? Oh, we do have Europe, but it's a week away, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't have much to worry about. We can almost just say we've got Real Madrid, and then we'll have 2 more games. There isn't a cup game, there isn't a FA Cup to worry about, a League Cup to worry about.
Yeah.
So should we risk starting that exact same team again, or do you see a change happening somewhere?
I foresee with just having a week between games that there's no reason to change it. I think that teams are capable of playing the exact same starting 11, even within a 4-day window, as long as there's been ample time of preparation for those games in the narrow window. So when you see that we have a week off from last game to this one, I don't see any reason that they couldn't have the same lineup on Saturday and have the same lineup against Real Madrid. We have players capable of coming in. We have players capable of being able to slot in, at least for subs, to give players rests when needed, especially now that there are 5 subs. There's even more chance that there's the same team, only because we are capable of making changes within the game far earlier than we've had in the past.
In terms of, kind of, we don't want to jump ahead too far to the Real Madrid game. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that the players will maybe mentally drop off a little bit for this game, knowing that the Real Madrid one is next? Or do you think Klopp will have them almost kicking up the backside, going, every game is a final for the rest of the season?
It has to be. It has to be every game is a final. And I don't see the players kind of focused on Real Madrid only because of what happened in the last game. I think that all the players are capable of, mentally believing that they can win by the margin we need to. But the reality is we have unfinished business in the league. We have games that are just as important. Bournemouth to a starting 11 or to whichever player is going to be slotting in is going to be their only focus when they're on the field. They're not going to be worrying about Real Madrid when they're playing in 90 minutes.
If you're Jurgen Klopp, do you think there's much need for a pre-game team talk other than just what you did last week? Or do you think you have to do one where you make sure they're like almost an Alex Ferguson?
They're not.
You can't say this is just Spurs because Spurs at the time were reasonably good. You have to hyper-focus your players going into the field for that particular game.
I say he says nothing. He plays the highlights of the United game with a little bit of music and have the players just kind of smiling, getting ready for what the game is. Because the reality is if they do what they did on Sunday? When did we play?
Sunday, yeah.
Yeah, if they do what they did on Sunday, they'll have no issue. I think Jurgen Klopp's, when it comes to team talks, when it comes to his ability to focus them, lead them, change, and critique, I think that the best time he does that is actually halftime. I think that that's when he's really laying into the players, really focusing and hyper-focusing on formation, tactics, and belief. When it comes to the beginning of games, he's obviously going to be saying stuff to them, but the players have their focus for the whole week, get it leading up to the game. They're going to be able to make sure that they themselves are focused. They don't need a coach telling them.
So just quick fire off the top of your head, instinct, gut feeling. What do you think the score will be this weekend?
I am feeling good. I don't think that we'll be scoring as many goals as against Manchester United, only because Bournemouth are a team and they play as a team. So I do foresee us being able to get a good 4-0.
I'm going to go one better. I think it'll be 5-0. That's what I think.
Fantastic. I'll take it. I'll be wrong on that one.
It'll be Nunes, it'll be Gakpo, it'll be Salah, and somebody surprised, and that's what I think. That's
what
I don't think of.
I would really love and have loved to have seen Harvey Elliott nick a goal, because I think that his ability to go forward in attacking play the last couple games has been really, really influential to how the rest of the team plays. So I would love that.
So let's all hope for a Harvey Elliott goal. Let's go for the last item of the night, and it's the traditional. It's the threshold question. Scott, are you ready for it? So you're stuck in a purgatory, eternal desert island for the rest of your existence, and one ex-Liverpool player is your companion. Who do you choose between Neil Ruddock or Julian Dix?
I think we'll go.
They're both horrible people, or they were at least when they were at Liverpool, and both flotation devices. So it works out two ways.
Well, see that, but also, I mean, if we're on a desert island and there's no way out, I'm going to take the easy road out, Julian Dix, just so he can bore me to death, right? So we'll go with that, and that way I don't have to be able to, live beyond staying in there with him.
I'm not sure who I would pick. Julian Dix, he irritated the hell out of me when he went to Liverpool. But at the same time, Neil Ruddock was good eating. Like, he got plenty of meat in his bones. So
Yeah,
you at least
good
would
point.
start
I'm sure
for a
that he
while.
could scrap together a couple meals from the stuff on the island, don't you think?
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, I would go for Ruddock simply because he's just not Julian Dix, and that goes for many of the world's worst dictators as well. At least they weren't Julian Dix. That's how I see things. Okay, so it just remains to say thank you to everybody for watching us and contributing in the comments.
Yes,
We
thank
love to
you.
see them. The fantasy football show will be on an hour later than usual. Will be on at 10 p.m. tonight Eastern time. The morning coffee will be on tomorrow morning. Keep an eye out for any mentions of a pre-match, post-match on Saturday. It's very early though for us. It's a 7:30 game, I believe, on Saturday.
That's right.
So
I'll be watching at work, so can you.
I will be watching from my bed because I need a lion. But make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and all of the other social media things, MySpace, Bebo, all of those things. Show my age here.
Whatever the kids are using nowadays.
The kids, the kids. And then join our Discord channel. That's where some of the best chat is. That's where all the cool people are. Just
Really
to
is.
say thank you to Scott. It was great to talk to you as always.
Yes, thank you, Macka. I appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. For everybody else, we will see you this time, same bat channel, with more nonsense and occasional intelligence.
There you
See
go.
you then. Peace
In
out.
the words of Jamie, up the Reds.